The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Richards and Associates, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. Sarah Chen adjusted her black blazer and walked slowly through the lobby, her heels clicking softly against the stone. Today marked exactly 1 week since Margaret Richards' funeral, and the office still felt hollow without her commanding presence. Sarah paused at the elevator, watching the numbers climb. 3rd floor, Margaret's corner office. The place where Sarah had spent countless hours learning the intricacies of wealth management, absorbing every lesson her mentor had to offer. Margaret had been more than a boss. She had been a guide, a teacher, and perhaps the closest thing to a mother figure Sarah had known in her professional life. The elevator doors opened with a gentle chime, and Sarah stepped inside. As the floors passed by, she remembered the phone call that had changed everything. Margaret, always so strong and decisive, had sounded different that Tuesday evening, tired, vulnerable. "Sarah, dear," Margaret had said, her usually crisp voice softened by exhaustion. "I need you to come to my house tonight. There are some things we need to discuss." Sarah had found Margaret in her study, surrounded by files and documents. The older woman's silver hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun, but her eyes held a weight that Sarah had never seen before. Margaret had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer just 2 weeks earlier. The doctors had given her 3 months. She had lasted only 2. "I've made some arrangements," Margaret had explained that evening, her fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. "My personal portfolio, my client relationships, entrusting them to you." "Not to the firm, to you," Sarah had protested. Of course, she was only 28, barely 3 years out of business school. She wasn't ready for such responsibility. But Margaret had been insistent. "You have something that can't be taught in classrooms," Margaret had said, leaning forward. "You understand people, you listen, you care about their dreams and fears, not just their bank accounts. That's what makes a great wealth manager." Now, standing in the hallway outside Margaret's former office, Sarah clutched the leather portfolio that contained the details of Margaret's personal client base. 12 high-net-worth individuals who had trusted Margaret with their financial futures. Combined, their accounts totaled just over $1.2 million in annual management fees. Sarah had discovered the arrangement 3 days after the funeral, when Margaret's personal attorney had called. The clients didn't know yet. Margaret had structured everything carefully, creating a separate consulting arrangement that existed parallel to her work at Richards and Associates. It was all perfectly legal, but it was also completely unknown to the firm. The office door stood slightly ajar, and Sarah could see boxes stacked neatly on Margaret's desk. The firm was already preparing to reassign her clients, to divvy up her accounts among the senior partners. They had no idea about the 12 names written in Margaret's careful handwriting, the 12 families who had followed her from her previous firm 15 years ago. Sarah. She turned to see James Morrison approaching from down the hall. As the managing partner of Richards and Associates, James commanded respect throughout the financial district. His gray suit was perfectly tailored, his tie an understated navy blue, but Sarah could see the strain in his eyes. Margaret's death had been a blow to the entire firm, both personally and professionally. "Good morning, Mr. Morrison," Sarah replied, closing the portfolio against her chest. "Please, call me James. We're all family here, especially now." He paused beside her, looking through the open door at Margaret's empty office. She was remarkable, wasn't she? 30 years in this business, and I never met anyone who could read people the way Margaret could. Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the portfolio in her arms. She taught me everything I know. That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. James turned to face her fully. Margaret spoke very highly of your work. She always said you had a natural talent for this business. I'd like to offer you a promotion as associate wealth manager. You'd work directly with Robert Chen on Margaret's former clients. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah that Robert Chen shared her last name, though they weren't related. He was one of the senior partners, known for his aggressive approach to client acquisition and his impressive track record of growing portfolios. He was also known for treating junior staff like expendable resources. That's very generous, Sarah said carefully. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. James smiled, but Sarah could see the calculation behind his eyes. Margaret's clients represent a significant revenue stream for the firm. We need to ensure they're in capable hands. After James walked away, Sarah entered Margaret's office for the first time since the funeral. Everything was exactly as Margaret had left it, except for the boxes of personal items that would be shipped to her sister in Portland. The walls still displayed Margaret's diplomas and awards. Her collection of crystal paperweights still gleamed. On the bookshelf, Sarah sat in Margaret's chair and opened the leather portfolio. Inside were detailed profiles of 12 clients, each one annotated with Margaret's handwritten notes. The Henderson, a retired couple in their 70s who were passionate about sustainable investing. Maria Santos, a successful surgeon who wanted to establish a scholarship fund for underprivileged medical students. The family, who had built a small tech company into a significant enterprise and needed guidance on estate planning. Each profile told a story, revealed dreams and concerns that went far beyond simple financial returns. Margaret had understood that wealth management wasn't just about numbers and markets. It was about helping people achieve their life goals. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Alina Volkov, one of Margaret's longtime clients. Sarah, I hope you're doing well. I know this is a difficult time. Could we meet for coffee this week? Margaret always spoke so highly of you, and I'd like to discuss my portfolio. Sarah stared at the message, her heart racing. Alina was one of the 12, a successful architect who had built her firm from nothing and now managed a portfolio worth several $1,000,000. She was also one of the most discerning clients Margaret had ever worked with. Over the next few hours, similar messages arrived from other clients. They weren't just reaching out for comfort, they were looking for guidance. Margaret had clearly prepared them for this transition, had planted the seeds of trust that would allow Sarah to step into her role. By late afternoon, Sarah had made her decision. She walked to James Morrison's office, her steps measured and deliberate. James, do you have a moment? He looked up from his computer, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Of course. Have you thought about my offer? Sarah sat down, placing the portfolio on her lap, but keeping it closed. I'm honored that you'd consider me for such a position, but I've decided to decline. James frowned. May I ask why? The compensation package is quite competitive, and the growth opportunities. I'm starting my own practice, Sarah said quietly. Margaret left me something more valuable than money. She left me relationships built on trust and understanding. I want to honor that. The silence stretched between them. James leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with new interest. That's quite a risk for someone your age. Do you have the capital, the client base? Sarah smiled, thinking of the 12 names in the portfolio. I have everything I need. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood in the small office she had rented downtown. It wasn't much, just 3 rooms and a reception area, but it was hers. She had spent the morning hanging Margaret's crystal paperweights on the windowsill, where they caught the morning light and cast rainbow patterns on the white walls. Her first official client meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. Alina Volkov had been enthusiastic about the transition, and her endorsement had helped Sarah secure meetings with the other 11 clients. The consulting contracts Margaret had established made the transition legally seamless, and Sarah had been careful to ensure that all fees and procedures were completely transparent. At exactly 10 o'clock, Alina arrived, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a warm smile. She was a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, dressed in a flowing blue dress that reflected her artistic sensibilities. I brought your favorite, Alina said, handing Sarah one of the cups. Margaret told me you were a cappuccino person. They spent the next hour discussing Alina's goals for the coming year. She wanted to expand her architectural firm internationally, but she was also interested in investing in sustainable building technologies. Sarah listened carefully, asking questions and taking notes, just as Margaret had taught her. You know, Alina said as their meeting wound down, Margaret used to say that the best wealth managers are really translators. They help clients translate their dreams into financial strategies. Sarah nodded, thinking of all the lessons Margaret had shared during their late-night conversations in the office. She taught me that money is just a tool. What matters is what people want to build with it. As Alina left, she paused at the door. Margaret chose well. I can see why she trusted Alina you with was all gone. Of this. Sarah sat alone in her new office, watching the light play across the crystal paperweights. She thought about the choice she had made, walking away from the security of a large firm to build something new. It was risky, certainly, but it was also an opportunity to honor Margaret's legacy in the most meaningful way possible. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Maria Santos, the surgeon interested in the scholarship fund. Sarah, I hope I'm not calling too early. I wanted to set up a meeting to discuss the foundation we talked about. Margaret had some wonderful ideas about how to structure it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. As Sarah scheduled the appointment, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Margaret had given her more than clients or contracts. She had given her a purpose, a way to help people achieve their dreams while building a career that aligned with her values. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the empty boxes that had once held Margaret's personal belongings. Sarah had kept a few items: a small crystal turtle that Margaret claimed brought good luck, a leather-bound notebook filled with investment strategies, and a framed photograph of Margaret receiving a community service award. In the photograph, Margaret was smiling broadly, surrounded by scholarship recipients from a program she had helped establish. It was the same smile Sarah remembered from their last conversation. Full of warmth and wisdom and quiet satisfaction, Sarah opened her laptop and began typing an email to her remaining prospective clients. She had a story to tell them about a mentor who had believed in the power of personal relationships, about the importance of understanding that behind every portfolio was a human being with hopes and fears and dreams worth protecting as she worked. The crystal paperweights continued to cast their rainbow patterns on the walls, a daily reminder of the woman who had taught her that success in business, like success in life, was measured not just in dollars and percentages, but in the trust of people who believed in your ability to help them build the futures they envisioned. Outside her window, the city hummed with activity, full of people pursuing their own dreams and ambitions. Sarah smiled, feeling ready to help them translate those dreams into reality, one relationship at a time.